I just have one question for
Yeah.
you, Sarah. Like
Yeah.
when I started my company 17 years ago, where was Virtudesk? Like this is like the holy grail for
Yeah.
any person out there. And
Welcome to the Leverage webinar. Today we have an amazing guest and our friend, Kelly Cardenas. Kelly, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome. And guys, we wanted to talk today about the team building and power of the team building. Kelly, maybe you can start with telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you started your company.
Well, with our company, we actually started in the most untraditional way in the world, meaning that we didn't check a demographic. We didn't do any of those things. My friend had said that she wanted to have an excuse to drive an hour to the city, which was Chicago at the time. And that's why we opened up our second location. And that really put our processes in a different realm. We had to communicate at the highest level because we had 19 to 23-year-olds that were running our business, and we weren't there, every single day. So when that happens, we had to make sure that we communicate to a point where even a 4-year-old could do it. And that was always our rule and our kind of mantra as we worked forward.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. And so as entrepreneur, what is your personal mantra when it comes to improving your life and business?
Commitment eliminates options, and whatever you're committed to eliminates the options of anything contrary to that commitment. And that was a big one that I learned very early on. I heard a guy speak and he said he had been married for 45 years. Oh. And when I heard this, I thought, wow, I want to be married for 45 years. I think this is amazing. And he said, commitment eliminates options. He said, once I committed to my wife, it eliminated the option of any other woman in my life ever. And what I did is I actually applied that in my business. I applied that in my marriage now. I applied that with my kids, and anything that I do, I want to make sure that I'm fully committed 100% to exactly what I'm doing. And I find that that's when the results really happen.
Mm-hmm. And how many team members do you have right now?
So at our height, we had 85.
Oh,
and
wow.
So, with 85 kids, and in our, we were in the professional beauty industry for years. We have since sold those companies. But when we did, we were dealing with kids that, some of them barely graduated from high school or very little college. And so our processes were so important, but we had to help them to understand that our processes and our rules were nothing more than a list of our screw ups. So that gave them the freedom to innovate and also gave them the power to be able to adapt immediately to what it is that we were doing.
Mm-hmm. I see. So I just wanted to ask you this question. Can you please share with us your secret on how do you build a team that works together like a fine-tuned machine? How do you do this? What is the secret there?
Well, Sarah, I believe number one is there's no secrets. A guy named Rick Belcastro told me all the time, there's no magic beans, there's no silver bullet. I believe that there's four stages to it. Number one is you have to have a solid reason why you're doing what you're doing. And this doesn't have to be groundbreaking. For me, I wanted to, have enough money to be able to go to the fair and play till I won the animal. And that took money. So that was a driving force, as simple as that was. It was signature to who I was. So that why is huge. And then once we establish that part of it, we get locked into it. We can then build the leaders. Once we build the leaders, they develop the culture. And once the culture is developed, it spits out the systems. And those systems are nothing more, like I said before, than a list of our screw ups. But I think a lot of times people get it backwards. They look to build the systems, then develop the culture around the systems, and then build their leaders around that. And I tell you, I think one of the most important thing that you can ever do outside of understanding why you're doing what you're doing is to really sit in and build your leaders as people. Because in the event that you have incomplete leaders, as my favorite movie in the world, which is Remember the Titans, in a very famous scene, he said, one of the guys said to the other guy, he said, attitude reflects leadership. And when you have a leader in a company that is having all kinds of challenges with their team, it's nothing more than a mirror reflection of who that leader is on the inside, as opposed to the processes and procedures that they think that people should be doing.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And as a team lead myself, I think that it's also very important to constantly support your team members, in any ways possible? What do you think about that? Like, how do you support your team members? How do you provide this support to them?
Well, again, it's not a secret, but I think it's imperative for leaders to stop for a second and to realize three things that my parents taught me from a very early age. Number one, you're awesome. Separate yourself from your accomplishments. When this happens, what happens is it frees up that leader to realize that they don't have to go out and do something, hit a task, hit a goal to be awesome. They are just awesome who they are. And this is what my mom told me every single day. Second one was you're beautiful. When she said this, I didn't understand it until later on in life, and actually until she passed away. And when she passed away, I realized when she was saying I was beautiful, she was encouraging me never to compare myself to anyone else. And leaders, we do this all the time. Yeah. We're constantly looking at somebody else's revenue, somebody else's team, and we're comparing. But once you stop comparing, then you can move on to number three, which my mom said, which was that you could do anything that you put your mind to, but just because you could do it does not make it your purpose. And I believe that there's a lot of leaders out there that have put themselves in roles simply because they can do it, but just because you could do it doesn't make it your purpose. So when you take that step back and you realize as a leader, before you even touch anyone, that you're awesome, separate yourself from your accomplishments. You're beautiful. Don't compare yourself. And you could do anything, but just because you could do it doesn't make it right for you. Now, then you're primed to be able to pour into other people. But I find that most of the time people try and build a team before they've completed themselves.
Right. Yeah. And I also think that it's very important to build a structure and the system, to understand who is doing what, like task by task, basically. So whenever you have a new assignment or whenever you have a new project, everybody just understands what exactly they're doing, what the role is, so they're not confused, and it's much, much easier to support people when they know what they have to do during the day, so that's great. And so let's say we have people who are thinking about starting a company or starting a team. So what do you think should be the first hire? Like, who is this person?
Well, the first hire, before, like I said, I think the first thing that we do is we establish that person, that leader, has joy inside them. And that joy is nothing more than falling in love with your current circumstances and allowing magic to happen around you. That way, what'll happen is you'll start to attract a like mind. I say for myself, the number one person, is to be able to have your accounting in line. The reason why I say this is because most of us don't prepare for our success. We prepare for the worst possible scenario. Right. So when I started my company, I actually went out and got the best accountant and the most expensive. And at the time, this accountant was doing all the accounting for all the Mandalay Bay corporations in Las Vegas. Oh, wow. Well, my location was only 1,200 square foot, and I had no business going after someone of that magnitude. But what it did was set me up for what I ultimately wanted to be, as opposed to what I was. And so that way, even if I never climbed to the heights that I wanted to, I was still prepared. But I find that most people, when they're starting a business, they get surprised by their success as opposed to preparing for it.
I see. That's great. And, I personally get a lot of questions, especially when we are attending like conferences during the year. Like, how do I start a team with virtual assistants, for example? You mentioned that you also work with people like outsourcing tasks all the time, right? Not just the in-house staff. So I would say that the advice that I can give here is it's better, and it's a good idea to start with an admin virtual assistant, the person who will be managing your team later on. When you're ready to grow, when you're ready to hire more people, add more people to the team, you will need an admin virtual assistant who will help you with, assigning tasks, managing the projects, checking and tracking every project and every little task and step there. So I think it's very important to understand what this person will be doing, during the day. And then when you feel that they're ready to grow, then you just add more people, and then this person will be helping you a lot. And I think that's just how you did that as well, right? You started with one person, and then you just continued to add more people. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things is to really look and to establish the type of culture that you want. And I think that, people say this it's a buzzword all the time, but most people don't know how to build them. They don't know how to build the culture that they want, whether you're working with a virtual assistant or you're working with, a person in person. I think the thing that a lot of times slips through the cracks is helping the person to understand what your definition of success is, and also you communicating with them of what their definition of success. Because some people, maybe just the sale is the definition of their success, or a higher number, where your definition of success is impact in the community. Well, those two things, if you're not on the same level, the thing that we fail at the most and we work at the least in life and in business, like my pops always said to me, was communication. And we've got to make sure that before you bring on a virtual assistant, an accountant, before you go to do anything, we need to make sure that the foundation is solid. And that foundation is you having a clear definition of what success means to you. And in the event, when you do that, when you bring people on, they can be in line with that and help you to be able to accomplish what it is that you're going to accomplish.
For sure. Yeah. And Kelly, we have a question. So what is the most challenging part of building a team with different nationalities and diverse background? What do you think about that?
I think one of the biggest things is the communication, right? And so it goes into 3 parts. And I love your question. I love the question there. And so I want you to write these things down. Number 1, where is your team from? Not where they're from as far as geographically, but also where are they from emotionally? Where are they from financially? So I circumvented this and I messed up on this. And this is why it's so important to me. And the question is so powerful, is because I screwed up on this a lot. I didn't take the time early on to know where the person was from. Number 2, I didn't take the time to understand where they were at the particular time in the present. All I did was jump. And this is what most entrepreneurs and hard charging people do. We jump to a place where we encourage them where they can go and all the potential that they can have and all the growth that they can have. But sometimes we suffocate them because they're where they came from and where they're at right now. They can't handle, or they're not prepared for that. So we need to communicate. And when we communicate at a high level, that means that there's a sender, a receiver, and results. And when you're dealing with, whether it be men, women, multicultural, you're dealing all over the country. And this is what we did. We dealt with all different demographics from 19 all the way to 60 years old. We dealt with, from every nationality that you could possibly think of, every demographic, and we had them together working in a cohesive team. And the only way that you could do that is if people feel seen, they feel valued, and then you encourage them of where they can go.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we have another question here. So you are such a busy influencer, right? Who is managing your social media? Like, who's creating those video content for you and all the designs that we see on social media? Who's doing that?
Well, a lot of it, for me, I love doing it. I love doing it, and I've streamlined the process. So say with my podcast, our podcast is in the top 1% globally. Now, my thought right off the bat always was speed to market, and speed to market leads right to what we're talking about today is process, right? And so my process and procedure is nothing more than a list of my screw ups. So as I screwed up, I wrote it down. It became a procedure for tomorrow. Right. And so with us, with our podcast, we can actually record and have it up on all platforms, have the social content done, sent out to the interviewee, and it's done within 25 to 30 minutes of us being done, because the process is so tight. So we need to make sure that happens. And for me, I love, I've got a creative mind, but I've also got a business mind also. So I love to be able to be involved with the creation of content also. And I think that the more and more we streamline, especially right in your wheelhouse, especially with virtual assistants, you really can rule the world and not have to do that much.
Yeah, for sure. You can focus on your business, on your clients, while your virtual assistant is helping you out with social media. And a great example would be, let's just say, for example, you are a real estate agent or you are an influencer, right? You have such a busy schedule. You just don't have time to constantly, upload files on social media and engage with audience. You can easily assign that to a virtual assistant and just free up your time so you can focus on what's like the most important things to you. So I think that's just great. But can you tell me like what tasks, maybe you have specific tasks that you're assigning to the social media manager that you have or something like this? Like, are there any specific tasks that you would assign to this person?
Well, I would look at it and say that, as far as the scheduling and responding, I like to, but I tell you, Sarah, I like to respond also though, because I think that a lot of people miss out on social media opportunities because they take the two words and they put them together.
Right.
Social media, they do it together. Split those two words up, social media, meaning that you're social. And when you like it, you have to, if you're going to work with a virtual assistant to comment back on something, it's got to come from your voice. So that voice has to be communicated at a high level, and that comes down to the process part of it. So I like to be as engaged as possible, but again, I can't be all things to all people. I need to make sure that I'm doing exactly what I'm the best at. Like my mom said, right? I could do anything that I put my mind to. Could I manage my social media? Yes. Yeah. Could I do all these things? Yes. But would it be so much better for me to have a virtual assistant that I communicated the processes with and then release that so I can be present with every single person, just like I am here with you on the webinar?
I love that. I love this idea. Yeah, because, I heard from some of the people that, if I hire a virtual assistant or let's say an in-house assistant, it doesn't matter. I will give all the tasks to this guy and then that's it. I can just focus on my clients and do nothing. I just don't think that it's going to work like that, because if you want to be at least a little bit popular on social media, if you want to tell people more about your business or more about yourself, you need to be involved in the process. You need to communicate with your assistant, in-house assistant, virtual assistant, doesn't matter. You have to be involved in the process and constantly give your feedback and updates to your assistant for sure, because no one can do this for you. No one can be you in social media, So I think it's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah. And we're just suggesting that to other people all the time. Then when you hire a virtual assistant, that's great, but just make sure that you're also involved in the process,
Well, so, and with us too, Sarah, when we built this, see, before virtual assistants were a thing, I was in the professional beauty industry. So I had one client, just like you, I would have you sit down in a chair. Well, I found that was a limited resource at that time. Yeah. So then I brought on a kid. I brought that kid on. I paid a minimum wage. Now I could do two guests. I could do you and I could do your friend. I could be cutting your hair. I could be, the assistant would be blow drying. But what I had to do the whole time, and this goes back to that team building, I had to empower this little young lady at 19 years old to feel like she was on top of the world, to understand where she was from, to understand where she's at the time, and where encourage her where she could go. And that way you would feel comfortable and feel like you're getting that amazing experience. And we did this throughout the country with 19-year-olds who then created a situation where the person was locked into the service as opposed to the individual. And too many. And please, I want you to play this over and over again. Too many leaders put too much emphasis on themselves as being the guru, as opposed to building up their team to be able to expand and build leaders as opposed to followers.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I just wanted to show you a couple of slides that we prepared here. And I think that's going to be really helpful for people who are, trying to start a team and they don't know how to do this. So please chime in, because I know that you also have in-house staff and you are also outsourcing some tasks. So here you go. This is the amazing example of how you can start the team right away. So for example, you are an influencer and you have your local team, like let's say a social media manager or something like this, or a guy who's filming your clips and helping you out with TikTok and Instagram, for example. So then you can hire a virtual assistant who will be working with your local team and yourself as well. And then you can just divide those tasks between them and they can actually work together as a perfect combination. What do you think about this?
I think it's amazing as long as the communication is there. And so and it sounds silly, but dumbing down the tasks to a place where a 4-year-old could do that task. And when I say this, it's not to go against the person's education who's working with you, but my dad did this from a very early stage. What we did is we broke everything down. He asked me, sat me down when I started my company at first. He said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I cut hair." He said, "No, what do you do?" And I said, "I cut hair." The third time I knew he was asking me a different question, but he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I pull up to the salon." He said, "Okay, write it down." He said, I said, "What do you do next?" I said, "I open the door." "Which way do you turn the knob?" "To the left." "Write it down." And I wrote down every single thing, and we planned out every single thing as far as process. So in the event that someone was sick, they couldn't do their job, the person could read the manual and it would be so simple, broken down to the lowest common denominator. And this is why it's so important in your processes and procedures. But your process and procedure is nothing more than a list of your screw ups. And when you communicate that to your assistant or to the person who you're working with in person, that person now has freedom to innovate, because when they innovate and try something, they screw up, they get to write it down and make it a new rule. And when you create that type of culture, then the possibilities are exponential.
For sure. Yeah. 100% agree with you. It's very important to understand all the processes. And just like you said, when somebody, let's say, got sick, it's going to be much, much easier to let's say, replace this person for a couple of days, right? Or do something like that. So your processes are still there and everybody understands what they're doing. So I think that's great. And here you go. This is the next org chart where we are showing like how you and your local team can work with virtual team as well. And just like I said in the beginning, we probably can start with admin virtual assistant. And just like I said, this guy can help you manage other virtual assistants in the future. As you can see here, later on, you can focus on social media assistants. You can focus on admin assistants and multimedia. For example, the guy who will be filming your clips and editing them, posting them on TikTok, Instagram, everywhere, right? And then at the same time, your admin virtual assistant will be taking care of the managing process, where he is proofreading the content, proofreading the caption that goes on social media, and everything that you were doing before, you can just delegate that to an admin virtual assistant. What do you think about this one?
I just have one question for you, Sarah. When I started my company 17 years ago, where was Virtudesk? Like this is like the holy grail for any person out there. And for me, I don't consider myself an influencer. I'm a guy who talks about what I do. I've been an entrepreneur in the entrepreneur space for 17 years. And I wish that I would have had Virtudesk when I first started, because it creates in this org chart, not only the org chart, but also with Virtudesk, it makes it so simple. And where the barriers to entry were so large when I started off, and then to be able to look at this and say, wow, I mean, you really, as long as you have those things in line, right? As long as you have your why in line, as long as you have the leadership, and it could be you're the leader, right? You're the only leadership person, but we need to make sure that you're good before you bring on anybody else, because all you're going to do is multiply yourself, right? Multiply either the challenges or the successes. But I tell you, Sarah, like not only the org chart itself, but with Virtudesk, like I wish that you would have been a Christmas present for me 17 years ago. That would have circumvented a lot of pain.
Right. But yeah, at the same time, now you are an influencer with such an amazing background, right? You know so many things, and you know how to build teams now. So I think it's also a great experience. Yeah.
Thank you.
So this would be the last org chart. And here we can actually see how many people you can handle with the help of your admin virtual assistants or director of ops, for example. If your team is, expanding all the time and you're just adding more people, this is how it can look like. So it's going to be you, your local team again, right? Maybe like a videographer or something like this. And then you have a director of ops, the person who will be managing other team leaders. In this case, it's going to be marketing manager, sales manager, customer relationship manager. So it all makes sense. It's all about the structure. It's all about the structure and tasks that these people are doing daily. It's very important to understand that from the beginning, right? And then you can see that the marketing guy can manage other people as well, right? He can manage the video editor and graphic designer. The sales guy can manage the prospecting person and so on, right? So I think it's just a great example of how you can easily build a team. But again, you also need to spend some time, on thinking about all the tasks that these people will be doing. So I think it's very important to understand this. What do you think about that one?
Well, Sarah, I believe you're a genius. Looking at the org chart, looking at this, it's amazing. And the thing that I want the listeners to understand the most, number one, is Virtudesk has made it so easy, not or so simple in creating the org chart and also having the availability for the virtual assistants. But I want to emphasize this as much as possible. If you go back to that last chart, can you go back to the last org chart?
Yep.
I want all of you to see that every single thing leads back to you. So if you are not healthy personally, professionally, spiritually, and financially, it does not matter how many people you put around you because you will just amplify what is going on with you. So that's the only thing, the only caution that I give as you grow, because I grew faster than I should have at the time because my mind was, I was going, but what I, if I'm looking at it in hindsight, what I would have done is I would have peeled it back a little bit because I got so in love with my systems, which I tell you, Sarah, created some of the most amazing people in the world. But I got so in love with the system and I managed the people. And that's where I failed. We have to love the people and manage the system. And when you flip those around and you love the system and you manage the people, it's where you're going to get into challenges. And this is where I've lost millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. But I wish that I would have had Virtudesk in, 17, 18 years ago. It would have made my life a lot easier and there would have been a lot more money in the bank.
Yeah, but now we know each other. So there you go. I think it's a great start, So here I just wanted to share a couple of tasks. This is just an example. Obviously, the general virtual assistant can do much more than this, but this is just a couple of them. So obviously, you can assign different types of tasks to one virtual assistant. Let's start with email management, calendar management, social media content creation, to MLS management. That's just for real estate, for example. And it's just so many things that you can assign, and everything basically can be delegated. And it's important to sit down, write this down, and just understand what tasks this person will be doing for you. And then this one is the inside sales agent. This is the guy who will be doing the cold calling for you, or picking up the phone, scheduling appointments. So these are some of the tasks that this guy can do. Do you have just the admin, right, in your team right now, or you also have the marketing manager and the guy who's doing cold calling, for example?
Well, now looking at, it's amazing. I was telling you this before we started the podcast, is Sarah, these people don't need to be listening to me. They need to be listening to you and grabbing a hold of every single ounce of what it is that you're talking about. Being able to see, we've got a retreat. It's called a hideout. And honestly, for me, having someone who is cold calling, having someone who is doing those things and posting all those things, it's amazing how much time you can have back. And again, focus on those things. So my hat's off to you and to what it is that you're doing. Because honestly, I'm not mad that I started my company at the time because I got to learn it, but I'm telling you, to be able to embrace modern day tools and technology like Virtudesk, it really blows the roof off of things.
I know, right? And I think we have one more question. So any tips on how you can encourage your team to collaborate with each other? I think it's very important. It's a great question.
Well, I think one of the big things is to check the vibe. Okay. My dad would always say, all you have to do to grow in a company is grab a hold of someone's wrist. And I said, well, why would you grab someone's wrist? He said, put your thumb where the doctor would put the thumb and feel the pulse. You got to feel the pulse in a team. And the way that you do that is by spending time with them, understanding them, and then start to assess what vibe is happening. And most of the time, a vibe happens because of, it just happens. We manage the vibe that happens as opposed to choose the type we want. And so once we figure out the type of vibe that's happening, then we could choose the type that we want to bring into it. And we could do this by little tiny manipulators. Like, say, for instance, before we started the podcast, Sarah, we hopped on, we were talking, we weren't just talking about Virtudesk, we were talking about our lives, where you live, what are you guys doing, all those things. That was intentional on my side to create a vibe. So then that way it was authentic when we were talking. Make sure that you choose. And what I would suggest is with your team, allow them to choose it. Some days they want to be productive. Some days they want to be happy. Some days they want to have a good time. Some days they want to sell, but not every day is exactly the same. Let your team choose the vibe and then construct the manipulations around that. And we did this with music.
We did
it with music to choose the vibe. And so what we did was we said non-lyrical. We didn't want anything that was recognizable. And it had to either be non-lyrical or foreign music. And the reason why is because we didn't want to evoke any emotion, positive or negative, when they came into our environment. Now, the guests never realized this. It just became a background, but we didn't want them to hear a song that they had broke up with their boyfriend or their girlfriend and then have a negative emotion attached to that. That's a vibe manipulator. Another vibe manipulator was allowing a different person to be the boss for the day, and they could choose any task that everyone had to do, and it became a game. And so when you start to do that, you really empower people. But what I would suggest, and this is the last thing that I'll say on this, is I would ask your team, I would ask you and I would ask your team, how do we want to be viewed externally, right? How do we want our guest, our B2C, our C, how do we want them to view us? Well, the way that want them to view us is the way that we will treat our team. I built a multi-million-dollar company with zero marketing because what I did is I focused on the relationships of the people who worked inside of the business, and that will permeate to everything else.
Yeah, that's just awesome. Thank you for sharing this. I think it's very important to, focus on the relationship with your team members. And just like you said, not every day is the same. I agree with you. Sometimes, we can be a little bit more relaxed. Sometimes we're actually focused on work like every second, and it depends. But at the same time, we are trying to work together every day and to help each other. And the main thing is to support each other. That's very, very important for me, and I think for you as well.
And I want to just reemphasize this as much as possible. As we scale with businesses, as we grow, as we do all these things, which we all want to do, the one thing that you will never be able to scale is people. And when you can really move people, there's three parts to it. Number one is you gain their attention. Number two, you gain their focus. And number three, you grasp their heart. Once you grasp their heart and you have connection point with their heart, with the people, the possibilities are endless. And so if we focus in on people and the relationships, then we can scale all the rest of the stuff, which is the systems, the virtual assistants, and all these things, but make sure that you are a master at dealing with the one thing that fuels everything, which is people.
Yeah, thank you so much for this, Kelly. And I think we had a great webinar today. We shared a lot of our, thoughts and feedbacks and everything. So thank you so much for this. We love you. We support you, and you're an amazing influencer. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a great day.